She had the nerve to say it with her mouth full of salmon I paid for. "Why can't you be more like Carol's husband?" she said, sawing into her fillet with that smug little wrist flick she does when she's about to belittle someone. He rebuilt their deck by hand, took her to Paris, got her a vintage bike for their anniversary. You just, exist. She didn't even look up when she said it, just kept chewing, like she was reading a Yelp review of her own marriage and found it lacking. I didn't flinch, didn't even set down my fork, just nodded once like I was hearing a weather report. Rain tomorrow, storm brewing, tornado inbound. Then came the line that flipped something ancient and final inside me. He's a real man. I looked up at her, calm as a dead lake. You should have married him then. She snorted, rolled her eyes, and stabbed at her asparagus. God, you're so sensitive, it's just a fact. What she didn't realize, what most people like her never do, is that some men don't explode. Some men listen. And when we decide something's over, we don't scream or punch drywall or post cryptic Facebook statuses, we vanish. We make moves that don't echo until the house is already empty. She thought the dinner ended like any other. Me, brooding, her victorious. But I wasn't brooding, I was taking inventory. Fork, knife, napkin, ring, I didn't sleep, not because of heartbreak, because I was ready. You know what made me angriest? Not the comparison, not even the real man comment. It was how casual she was about dismantling a life. She said it like she was comparing lawnmowers. His has more horsepower, as if I was just the default setting until someone better showed up. And I realized she never chose me, she just settled. I was the shelf-stable option, the thing you keep in the pantry until a fresh alternative rolls in. I stood up sometime past midnight and walked the house, not out of nostalgia, out of precision. I touched the walls I painted, the couch I reupholstered, the cabinets I installed. She never noticed the details, never thanked me, just assumed the house assembled itself like a Lego set. In the kitchen, I found the envelope I'd prepped months ago, back when her jokes stopped being funny and started being tests. I slid the ring off my finger. It didn't hurt. It clicked like a piece finding its place. I wrote one line under my name. If I was never enough, don't look for me when you realize he isn't either. Then I packed, not a duffel bag, not a carry-on, a moving kit, labels, binders, pre-signed bank forms. Even the pet's records were already updated. I left food and cash for the cat. She could keep him. He'd already learned how to ignore her. As I loaded my truck, I noticed the porch light flickering. I didn't fix it. By dawn, I was 2 counties away. By noon, across the state line. And here's the part they don't tell you. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks or sunshine. It feels like quiet, like finally exhaling after years of holding your breath just to keep the peace, like walking into a room and not bracing for a comment. If you're still with me, if this sounds like something you've lived or are living, do me one favor. Tap that subscribe button. More than 97% of folks listen without it, but it helps the team keep sharing stories that don't get sugar-coated. Anyway, she wouldn't know where I went, no trackers, no mutuals. I even bought a burner GPS just for the drive and crushed it with a hammer before I crossed the border. This wasn't a tantrum, it was a funeral, with no body, no eulogy, and no one invited. And she was still in bed when I disappeared, probably thinking of how to spin the next jab, wondering why I couldn't be more like Carol's husband. She'll find out, just not in the way she wants. I timed it to the minute. 4:43 a.m., early enough she'd be dead asleep, late enough that the neighborhood cameras wouldn't catch headlights. I didn't slam doors or creak floorboards. I moved like a man already gone. The envelope sat where her coffee usually did because I knew that's where she'd see it first. She's a creature of routine. 5 sugars, splash of almond milk, phone in left hand, scanned the counter. The ring lay on top of the letter, glinting in the under-cabinet light I turned on just before locking the door behind me. The letter wasn't dramatic. No, you broke me, no laundry list of sins. Just a quiet list of facts. I even wrote it in blue ink so it wouldn't feel like a lawyer's letter. I told her I had listened for years, that I believed her when she said comparison was just how women vent, that I excused every jab as stress or sarcasm or fatigue, but that when she said I just existed, something in me woke up. I wrote, existing isn't what hurts. What hurts is realizing that's all I've ever been allowed to do with you. She wouldn't cry at that line, not yet, not until she saw what wasn't in the house anymore. I didn't take much, just what I needed. My ID, A prepaid debit card I'd been loading quietly for months, the title to the truck, and one suitcase. Most of the bank accounts were already rerouted. I'd moved my checks to a new institution 3 weeks earlier and shut down the joint savings under the guise of consolidating. She didn't notice. She rarely logged in. Numbers weren't her concern. Status was. The cabin I drove to? Bought it under a Shell LLC named after my grandfather's favorite fishing lure. She met the man once and forgot his name within a day. She wouldn't make the connection. 3 states, 8 hours, 2 gas stops. I didn't listen to music, just the hum of the tires and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat, not anxious, not panicked, just quiet. When I reached the gravel turnoff, I let the dust settle before opening the door. The air smelled like pine and wet soil. Birds were starting to stir. I stepped out and stretched, not like a man arriving, like a man returning. Inside, everything was ready. Bed made. Propane stocked. Generator tested. The fridge hummed gently, cold and empty. It was the first place I'd been in years that didn't echo with her voice. No sighs, no comparisons, no daily performance review masquerading as just being honest. I turned off my phone. Not airplane mode. Off. Fully. I pulled the SIM card, cracked it in half, and tossed it in the fire pit. She'd never track me. Not through devices, not through friends, not through guilt. Then I stood on the porch, holding the ring in my palm. I felt its weight, smaller than I remembered. Funny how something that used to mean forever now felt like a pawn ticket for a life I didn't want back. I dropped it into an empty mason jar and screwed the lid tight, not out of sentiment, out of precision, because I knew someday she'd come looking, and I'd want to remember how small it really was, how small I had let myself become. That morning, as light crept over the treetops, I made coffee in silence and opened a blank notebook. Not to write poems, not to cry, to document, not an escape plan, a post-mortem. And her grief hadn't even started yet. By mid-morning, she was still in her robe, hair tied up in that half-hearted bun she wore when she thought no one would see her. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock above the fridge, the same one I'd fixed twice and she never noticed. My neighbor, old Mrs. Delaney, saw her through the window, said she was pacing between the counter and the coffee maker, cup trembling, phone in hand. When she spotted the envelope, she didn't open it right away. She stood there, staring at the handwriting like it was a snake about to strike. She finally tore it open with a butter knife. Read the first line, blinked, read it again, then the second paragraph. That's when her hand went to her mouth. She sank into the kitchen chair, the letter still open, lips moving silently as she read the words that weren't angry, weren't begging, weren't even sad, just final. She reached the end, and that's when her body gave out. Mrs. Delaney said it was like watching a puppet have its strings cut. She folded in on herself, head on her arms, shoulders shaking. She tried calling my phone first, straight to voicemail, then the work number, disconnected. My email bounced back with an auto reply. Account no longer active. She must have thought it was a glitch. She's always believed she could talk her way out of anything, that a clever tone or teary babe could rewind reality. She had no idea I'd already rerouted every thread connecting us. She texted my mother next. Have you heard from him? The reply came a half hour later. Yes, he's fine, nothing else. That alone must have cracked something deeper than the letter, because for the first time she realized I hadn't disappeared into chaos. I'd left cleanly. Then she called Carol. Her tone probably started sweet. She always sweetens her voice when she needs validation. Hey, guess what your perfect friend did? He just left. Silence on the other end. Then maybe a quiet, good for him. That one phrase would have been a blade. She made it to the bedroom, pulling open drawers, realizing shirts were missing. The safe was empty except for her passport, the file cabinet cleared of every document with my name. She flung open the closet, half the hangers gone. It wasn't rage anymore. It was panic dressed as denial. Where are you? She whispered to no one, clutching the letter like it could answer. She went outside barefoot, scanning the driveway, maybe expecting to see the truck, maybe hoping this was some twisted test she could win by crying hard enough. But all she found were tire tracks already softened by morning dew. By afternoon, she'd called the police, told them her husband was missing, might be in danger. The officer who showed up had that calm voice people use when they've already read the file. Ma'am, his accounts show planned withdrawals, no signs of distress. Looks like he left voluntarily. She must have stared at him blankly. You mean he just left? That's what it looks like, ma'am. She thanked him automatically, though her throat had gone dry. When the door shut, she slid down against it, phone slipping from her hand, the sound of her breathing jagged and shallow. She wasn't crying now. Not really. Just gasping, like someone who'd been holding her breath for years and suddenly realized there was no one left to save her from herself. And that's when the real collapse started. Not the physical one, but the one that happens when control evaporates. The kind of silence that fills the room when you finally understand the person you kept pushing away isn't standing in the doorway anymore. He's gone, and he's never coming back. By noon the next day, the house was a crime scene of her own making. Coffee spilled, drawers yanked open, blinds twisted half up, half down. The police arrived after she dialed 911 with a voice that cracked between panic and performance. My husband's missing, she told them. He left a note. Something's wrong, I can feel it. The officer who took the statement had that practiced patience of a man who's heard every version of every story. He asked for details, wrote them down slowly. When did you last see him? Last night? No, the night before. He seemed distant, depressed maybe. She handed him the letter like it was evidence of a crime. He read it twice, his face unreadable. Then he asked, any threats? Any mention of harm? No, she said quickly, desperate, but look at the tone, he's not himself. He folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and said the words that stripped her of the one illusion she had left. Ma'am, there's no sign of foul play. He withdrew funds legally, closed his accounts properly, left a clear message. He's not missing. He's done. Done? She echoed, as if the word itself was foreign. Men like that don't vanish without a plan. He wanted out. And by the looks of this, he nodded at the letter. He planned it carefully. She stood frozen at the counter long after they left, replaying that word. Done. It wasn't abandonment. It was completion. By afternoon, she switched strategies. If the law couldn't find me, maybe guilt could. She called everyone she could think of. Her version of the story kept mutating. He's having a breakdown. He's off his meds. He's confused. Funny, I'd never been on any medication, but pity travels faster than truth, and she was desperate to find anyone who'd listen. The first person she called was my sister. You know how sensitive he is, she started, trying for sympathy. He probably thinks I don't appreciate him. My sister's tone was dry as gravel. He told you to stop comparing him. You didn't listen. Then a click. Next was my cousin Mark. He didn't even let her finish. He warned you, he said flatly. He told you what would happen if you kept treating him like a placeholder. Then he hung up too. By evening, she tried my mother. That one must have stung. Because my mother didn't argue, didn't yell, she just said, he's safe, don't call again. That was the moment it started sinking in. The isolation wasn't accidental. It was airtight. She wasn't being shut out of my life. She was being cut off from her own network, the one that existed only because of me. Every friend she thought was ours had already picked a side. Quietly, decisively. She tried to post something vague online. Please pray for my husband. He's struggling mentally. But within minutes, the comments shifted. Old acquaintances responded. He seemed fine when I saw him last month. Didn't he sell the house near the lake? I thought you two separated already. The algorithm didn't care about heartbreak. It buried her post in a sea of baby photos and vacation reels. That night, she sat at the kitchen table surrounded by silence too heavy for one person. The police report sat on the counter, a copy marked voluntary departure. That phrase must have eaten her alive. She'd built her entire marriage on the assumption that I'd always orbit her gravity, pull away for a day, sure, but never leave the system entirely. Now she was the one circling nothing, every call unanswered, every friend too polite to tell her the truth. She wasn't searching for a missing man. She was living inside the aftermath of someone else's decision. And for the first time, maybe ever, she started to feel what I had for years, being spoken to, not heard, being needed, not valued, being surrounded, yet utterly alone. It started small, a failed swipe at the grocery store. She was buying oat milk, the $6 kind she always insisted on despite never finishing the carton. The card reader beeped. Declined. She frowned, tried again. Same result. The cashier looked at her the way strangers do when they smell dysfunction. She forced a smile, said something about fraud alerts, and pulled out a backup card. That one worked, but just barely. The real panic hit when she got home and tried logging into our joint checking. Nothing loaded, just an error screen and a blinking message. Access revoked by account holder. She refreshed twice, then checked her email. Buried among store coupons and newsletters she never unsubscribed from was a single notice from the bank. Joint access privileges modified per customer request, effective immediately. That's when she knew this wasn't some petty tantrum. This was designed. She called the bank, of course, her voice somewhere between anger and incredulity. "There must be a mistake," she said, layering her words with the usual charm she used on waiters and customer service reps. "This is our account. My husband just walked out. He's clearly unstable. I need access." The banker on the line paused, then said in the kind of steady tone that only comes from hours of training, "Ma'am, I see here a formal separation request was submitted and signed. Both parties were notified." "Notified when?" she snapped. He didn't hesitate. 14 business days ago." 2 weeks?" she barked, eyes flicking to the calendar. That was before the dinner, before the Carol's husband comment, before I gave her the last warning she didn't recognize as one. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "The documents were notarized. Access was restructured per the separation terms. Your name was removed from primary control." She hung up before the boilerplate condolences could hit. Then came the second snap. Her phone dropped service mid-call to her sister. No signal. She restarted it. Nothing. Walked around the house. No bars. It hadn't dawned on her yet. The account, the billing, the contract. It was all under my name. The plan she used to FaceTime her friends. The one she mocked for being cheap. I paid for it. Quietly. Monthly. Without fail. Until now. She drove to the mobile store in a fury, demanding her number back, her plan reinstated. The guy at the counter pulled up her info and shrugged. "It's a canceled line. Account's closed. You'll need a new number." "But it's my number." He raised an eyebrow. "Not according to the paperwork." She left without a phone. Just silence and the echo of her own name spoken back to her like it didn't mean anything anymore. The last thread to snap was the credit card. She tried using it online, probably to soothe herself with retail therapy, maybe to order something extravagant as a statement of control. Declined again. She checked the app. Account closed. Statement marked. Authorized cardholder access terminated. She didn't even bother calling that time. She knew what she'd hear. And that's when it finally clicked. Not as an insult, not as a suspicion, but as a cold fact carved into her reality. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a blueprint, a series of moves I'd made while she was busy comparing me to a man who didn't even pick up his own kids from school. While she was laughing with her friends about upgrading if she ever got the chance, I'd been preparing for exit velocity. Because men like me don't throw tantrums. We draft plans, we wait, we watch. And then, one day, we execute with the kind of precision that leaves no breadcrumbs. She stood in the middle of the living room, holding her dead phone, staring at her useless card, and listening to the silence of a house that no longer echoed with any sound but her own breathing. And maybe, just maybe, that's when she started to understand what done really looks like. Not loud, not messy, just final. After the phone lines dried up, after the apps locked her out and the banking calls turned cold, she did what most cornered people do. She tried to rewrite the story, control the narrative. She needed someone to tell her she wasn't the villain. Someone who'd nod, agree, stroke her ego and say, "You didn't do anything wrong. He's just too sensitive." And in her mind, that person was always Carol. Carol, her best friend of 15 years, brunch buddy, yoga class partner, the one whose life she constantly paraded as a yardstick for our own. "Look how much he loves her," she'd say. "See how he plans surprises?" Always with that undertone, "Why can't you be like that?" So she texted Carol first, casual opener. "Hey, long week, you free to talk?" Carol replied simply, "Busy, why?" She ignored the tone, pressed on. "He left, out of nowhere, took his stuff, canceled everything. I think he's having a mental health crisis." Minutes passed, then a response. "Are you safe?" That wasn't what she wanted to hear, but she pounced on it anyway. "Yes, I'm fine, but everything's been a mess. He's not answering anyone. He blocked me." "I'm worried," Carol replied. "Did something happen between you?" That was her cue, she thought, her moment to set the stage. So she typed it all out, the dinner, the deck comment, the just exist line. She softened it, of course, said it was a joke, a passing thought. You know how I am, she added with a wink emoji. Blunt. The message bubble showed typing for nearly a full minute. Then came Carol's response. Yeah, I know exactly how you are. That one landed like a slap, but she still didn't give up. She tried pivoting to offense. Classic tactic. How's your perfect husband anyway? Still Mr. Romantic? Maybe I should have married him. Carol's reply took just 5 words. He's not perfect, but at least he never made me feel replaceable. Then the typing bubble returned, paused, then more words appeared. You compared him to my husband. It wasn't a question, not really. There was a pause in their chat, a long one. Maybe she was staring at the screen, heart pounding. Maybe she realized in that second that Carol wasn't flattered, that what she thought was harmless banter had been something else entirely, humiliation dressed up as jokes. Then the final message came through, each word like glass breaking. You don't deserve him. She didn't reply, couldn't. What was there to say? For the first time she understood that Carol wasn't just a prop in her narrative. She was a person, one who'd watched her casually belittle the man she vowed to love, and now wanted no part in the fallout. Carol didn't block her, didn't need to. The silence that followed was worse. She probably sat in the living room afterward, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes of things she didn't notice missing until now. A charger cable, a tool set, his worn flannel jacket she used to sleep in when she wanted to feel close, gone. Not taken out of spite, taken because it belonged to him. Just like his time, his love, his dignity. And now, none of that belonged to her anymore. She scrolled through old photos like they held answers, rewatched a video of us at some beach party years ago. In it, I'm laughing, pulling her toward the water. She's brushing me off, rolling her eyes at the camera, muttering something like, he's such a dork. In the moment, it probably felt harmless. But now she watched it differently, saw what everyone else had seen for years. The slow erosion she passed off as personality. Even her reflection in the screen seemed to recoil, and for the first time, maybe ever, she realized that she had built the coffin, nailed it shut, and handed me the map out. She must have stared at the bank statements a dozen times, hoping some line item would jump out, some breadcrumb I accidentally left behind, but all she saw were precision cuts. Subscriptions canceled, investments rebalanced, and everything closed or rerouted. That's when it hit her. If I'd gone through the trouble to unwind the financials, maybe I'd unraveled more than just the marriage. So she called my old job. It wasn't pride that made her wait so long. It was fear. She still clung to the belief that I'd returned to some kind of routine, that maybe, despite everything, I'd show up at my desk Monday morning, tie slightly crooked, coffee in hand, like all of this was a bizarre midlife detour, but panic doesn't care about pride. It shoves you past the point of dignity. Hi, yes, was his wife. I was just wondering if he's come into work? He's been unreachable. HR didn't even hesitate. Oh, he left months ago. She froze. I'm sorry, what? Left the company. His last day was, let me check, March 3rd. That was nearly 3 months before the dinner. The rep kept talking, oblivious to the internal earthquake on her end. He cashed out his pension, declined the exit lunch, signed the release forms electronically. Very efficient. Efficient. The word must have landed like a punch. He didn't say anything? She asked, her voice thin, unfamiliar. There was a pause. He didn't leave a forwarding address, if that's what you mean. She tried to steady her breathing. Did he talk to anyone, mention where he was going? No, honestly, it was all very deliberate, not rushed, just settled. That last word did it. Settled, like the closing of an estate. She thanked them in a hollow tone and hung up, staring into the middle distance of her perfectly curated kitchen, the one I remodeled piece by piece, while she complained that the backsplash wasn't quite like Carol's. I hadn't just left her, I'd left everything. The job I'd shown up to for 12 years, the one where I trained 3 department heads, mentored interns, pulled double shifts when layoffs hit, the one she never once asked about unless it involved a raise, gone. erased like chalk on wet pavement. She opened the drawer where we kept the mail, neatly sorted, labeled. She flipped through old letters, trying to find something, anything that hinted at what I was planning, but it was all clean, sterile, deceptively calm. Then, like someone trying to reassemble a puzzle mid-fall, she remembered a moment. Months ago, I'd come home, sat on the porch in silence, and watched the sunset. She'd peeked through the window, then rolled her eyes and walked away, muttering something like, "God, you're so dramatic sometimes." But I wasn't watching the sunset, I was rehearsing my exit. She sat on the floor then. Not the couch, the floor. Because the weight of realization has a way of dragging you lower than you ever expected. She clutched her knees, rocking slightly, staring at the shadows crawling up the walls. It was early evening, but it felt like midnight. She didn't cry this time. Crying would have offered relief. Instead, she whispered, "Where did you go?" As if saying it out loud might conjure me from the air. But the truth settled in her like concrete. She was the last to know. Not just about my leaving, but about me. About the version of me that planned, watched, waited. The man behind the smiles, the man she thought she understood, because she never asked why I stayed late at work, not to avoid her, but to study, to build the certifications I'd need to freelance on my own, to quietly sever the lifelines I knew she'd cling to. I didn't just leave the marriage, I dismantled the life she thought was permanent. And now she was left with the blueprint, but no architect. At first, she thought it was a glitch. She opened Facebook and tapped into her memories tab, probably searching for something to tether herself to. A birthday post, an anniversary photo, some curated moment to prove I'd once belonged to her world. But the albums were fragmented, tags gone, captions scrubbed, posts where I'd once commented now read, "Comment from unavailable user." She clicked through mutual friends, slowly, methodically. Most were still there, just quieter. No new likes, no shared posts. A few had unfollowed her entirely. Others remained but didn't engage, like statues placed just out of reach. When she clicked on my old profile, it redirected, blank, either deleted or cloaked in settings she couldn't crack. She tried searching my name, not just on Facebook, but everywhere, LinkedIn, Instagram, even Pinterest, nothing. The man who once shared photos of barbecue ribs and woodworking projects was gone without a pixel. Her messages to mutuals started soft. "Hey, have you heard from him?" Then edged into desperation. "I think something's wrong. He's not responding to anyone." But replies were sporadic at best. One friend said simply, "He told us not to get involved." Another left her on read. Then came the moment that shattered her illusion of reach. She stumbled across a post from my distant cousin, someone she barely spoke to, someone she assumed was inconsequential. It was a grainy photo of an empty dock at sunrise, no people in frame, just fog and still water. The caption read, "A man doesn't shout when he leaves. He disappears where applause doesn't matter." No hashtags, no context, but she knew that line wasn't for the cousin's followers, it was for her, because I hadn't just disappeared. I'd been erased, digitally, socially, systematically. My presence had been a network, and I'd unplugged every cord. She tried searching email addresses, old usernames, even my initials tied to photo credits I once uploaded on stock sites. All gone. Not hidden, wiped. She opened the wedding photos. Half were gone from the shared drive. The ones left had been renamed with cold efficiency. No more "our special day," just numbers and dates. That's when her frustration turned, shifted, began to rot into paranoia. Was everyone in on this? She opened group chats we used to be in together. One had renamed itself. Another was inactive. She typed a message in one. "Has anyone talked to him? Just checking he's okay." No response. She could see they'd read it. Her next step was darker. She tried accessing my work history through old HR portals. Nothing. She called the last known landlord of the place I lived in before we bought our house. "Sorry," the woman said. "No forwarding address. He settled his lease early." Settled. There was that word again. She scrolled through her own phone's gallery, hoping to find traces. Screenshots, voice notes, photos she'd ignored in the moment. But even those seemed to echo back at her now. In one, I'm smiling at a backyard fire pit I built from scratch. She remembered mocking the size of the stones. "Could have made it bigger," she'd said at the time. "Carol's is huge." She zoomed in now and noticed something else. My smile didn't reach my eyes. There's nothing more dangerous than a man who stops expecting appreciation. He doesn't rage, he plans. And when he finally leaves, it's not with slammed doors, it's through disappearance. The kind you can't trace, reverse, or explain away with a clever tweet. Now she was shouting into a void, calling into an abyss with no echo. She thought she'd broken me. She hadn't. She'd made me invisible until I decided to become unreachable. And it was supposed to be a harmless family thing, her cousin's kid's birthday or something equally low stakes, a backyard setup with folding chairs, mismatched tablecloths, and half-warm lemonade, the kind of event where small talk fills the air like gnats, boring, persistent, and hard to swat away. She hadn't been to one since I left. Most of them hadn't seen her face in months. Some had heard vague whispers. He took off. They're separated. No, she doesn't know where he went. But no one asked directly. They just nodded and watched her carefully, like they were trying to figure out if she was about to unravel. And she was. She showed up dressed like she was going to a brunch shoot, lipstick too red, heels that didn't belong on grass, sunglasses that stayed on too long. A performance. But her eyes gave her away. Even behind the smile, there was a hunted look. A woman who was used to leading the conversation and now feared every silence. It started small. A distant relative said something like, "Heard from your guy yet?" She laughed, too sharp, and waved it off. "Oh, you know him, always needing his space." Someone else tried to steer the subject away, but it was too late. The door cracked. Then her uncle, old school and straight-laced, muttered something about loyalty not meaning what it used to. She turned to him, mouth open with a ready retort, but nothing came out. Instead, she sat back, quiet, still. And that's when it happened. In the middle of passing a bowl of pasta salad, she blurted it. "I ruined it." The table went still. She blinked as if surprised by her own voice, then said it again, quieter. "I ruined it." A cousin awkwardly cleared her throat. Someone pretended to check their phone, but she kept going, eyes glassy, voice cracking not from volume but truth. "I compared him to Carol's husband. Over dinner. Said he wasn't a real man, just existed. That he wasn't enough." She shook her head like she was trying to dislodge the memory, but it clung. "And the irony," she said, almost laughing now, a kind of bitter, rattling chuckle. "That man, the one I held up like some paragon, Carol told me last week he forgot her birthday, didn't even pick her up from the airport. She Ubered home after a 10-hour flight." Silence. Not uncomfortable, just unavoidable. One uncle, the quiet one who only ever spoke when it mattered, set down his drink and looked her dead in the eye. "You didn't just lose him," he said, calm as a verdict. "You lost the last man who listened to you." She flinched like she'd been slapped, because that was the part she hadn't said out loud, not to her friends, not to herself. Not until now, I listened. To every complaint, every offhand remark, every dig cloaked as just teasing. I listened when she said Carol's husband built a pergola, or surprised her with spa weekends, or booked a random trip to Madrid just because. I listened when she asked why I couldn't be more like him. I absorbed it all, quietly, like insulation against the cold, until I stopped, until I realized listening was no longer love, it was just endurance. And the moment I recognized that, I planned my exit. Now sitting at that picnic table with the scent of overcooked burgers in the air and a single bee circling her untouched lemonade, she understood. The power wasn't in my silence, it was in what I took with me when I left. The listening, the patience, the man who always turned the light off after her, who always made sure the car had gas, who remembered her dad's allergy to shellfish even when she didn't. That man was gone, not because of one comment, but because of all of them, layered like bricks until the door finally closed. The gathering moved on, slowly, awkwardly, like a car shifting out of park. Kids chased balloons. Someone started cutting the cake. But she sat there, alone in a crowd, replaying every moment she thought was harmless. And for the first time, there was no script, only silence, only loss. The beach was nearly empty, just the hush of tide, the occasional crack of a seashell underfoot, and the early light brushing everything in gold. It was the kind of morning that didn't announce itself, the kind that didn't care who watched. I was sitting on a log, Sketchbook on my knee, a piece of driftwood in one hand, working lines into the paper with a slow calm I hadn't felt in years. Nothing elaborate, just shapes, curves, shadows. A dock, a shoreline, a figure standing alone in the surf. It wasn't meant to be anyone, but looking at it now, I realized it might have been me. That's when I saw the child, my niece's son, the one with the lopsided haircut and the Star Wars hoodie he wore in 90-degree heat. He walked past with a stick in one hand, dragging it through the sand like a plow. He paused, looked up at me, and smiled, waved like he knew me. And I smiled back. That's when I saw her. She was behind him, not following, just hovering, cautious. Her posture was stiff, her arms crossed, like she hadn't decided whether to approach or disappear. She looked different, thinner, paler, smaller somehow, the kind of small that comes when the world stops orbiting around you and you don't know how to hold your own weight. She stepped forward, slowly, like I was something that might vanish if she moved too fast. "I've been looking for you," she said, her voice barely above the wind. I didn't flinch, didn't stand, just nodded. "You always were, in other people." She swallowed that like a bitter pill. "I didn't mean to." I closed the sketchbook gently, not out of spite, but to mark the end of something. She stepped closer. "Can we talk?" The old me might have stood up, might have offered space, dignity, closure. But the man on that beach, he was done offering pieces of himself to people who only ever asked for the part they could mold. I looked down at the drawing one last time. "There's nothing left that belongs to both of us." She didn't argue, just stared, maybe hoping for some thread to grab onto, some past version of me that would give her a lifeline back to what we used to be. But I had nothing to give. I stood, brushed the sand off my hands, and walked toward the sun. Not dramatically, not as some poetic metaphor, just because that's where the path led. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no sobs, no final plea. Just waves pulling at the shore. I didn't need to turn around to know she was still there. Standing, finally, in the silence she once forced on me. And this time it was hers to keep.